My beloved child, have you ever noticed how the quietest moments often carry the loudest answers? There is a reason your heart slowed down before these words reached you. Not because you were searching, but because something unseen has been moving toward you for longer than you realize. If you stay with this moment, you may recognize a feeling that has been waiting patiently inside you. Don't skip. Sometimes what seems like an ordinary message becomes the very mirror that helps you understand what was hidden in plain sight. Today is not about chasing someone else's story. It is about discovering why your own presence became impossible for one soul to forget, even after they convinced themselves they had moved on. There was a season when your soulmate believed silence would make everything easier. They thought distance would calm emotions, that time would gently erase the questions they never had the courage to ask. Outwardly, life continued. Conversations happened. Smiles appeared. New routines formed. Yet somewhere beneath every ordinary day, an invisible comparison kept returning. Every place they visited reminded them of a conversation that never happened. Every meaningful achievement felt strangely incomplete because someone was missing from the picture, though they rarely admitted it aloud. They were not haunted by dramatic memories. Instead, they were followed by quiet moments that refused to disappear. Those moments became the beginning of a realization they never expected. What surprised them most was not the memory of your face or your words. It was the memory of how they felt when they imagined the future with you somewhere inside it. That feeling refused to fade. It quietly waited through busy days, through distractions, through every attempt to replace depth with convenience. Eventually they stopped asking why your name continued to echo in their thoughts. They began asking something far more honest. What if I misunderstood the one person who truly mattered? That single question became heavier with every passing day because the answer could not be found by pretending nothing had happened. Perhaps you have experienced moments when your own heart sensed that someone was thinking about you without any clear explanation. Not as certainty, but as a gentle pull you could never fully describe. Those moments often arrive without noise. They appear while watching the evening sky, hearing a familiar melody, or pausing between ordinary responsibilities. They remind us that meaningful connections rarely disappear all at once. They simply become quieter until the truth is ready to speak again. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you, and it is unfolding one layer at a time rather than all at once. Then came the moment everything began to change. It did not happen during a grand event. It happened through an unexpected conversation where someone mentioned your kindness without trying to impress anyone. There was no exaggeration, no dramatic storytelling, only a simple reminder of the person you have always been. Your soulmate listened more carefully than anyone realized. For the first time, they stopped remembering only the difficult moments. They remembered your patience, your sincerity, your quiet strength, and the way you made ordinary days feel meaningful without demanding attention for it. That realization settled deeply within them because it revealed something they had overlooked while they were focused on everything else. And that is where their greatest regret quietly began to reveal itself. It was not about one conversation. It was not about one decision. It was the realization that they had spent too much time searching for extraordinary signs while overlooking the extraordinary person who had already entered their life. Regret rarely arrives with loud announcements. Sometimes it enters softly, carrying only one difficult question: why did I understand their value only after creating distance? That question became impossible to ignore because every honest answer pointed back toward you. Yet this is only the beginning of what has been unfolding behind the scenes. The truth they uncovered about their own heart is only the first piece of a much larger picture, and the next revelation will explain why one unexpected discovery made that regret even deeper than they ever imagined. A quiet realization has a way of arriving long after the noise has disappeared. That is exactly where this story continues. Long after they believed the chapter involving you had closed, something unexpected began happening within them. It wasn't a dramatic event that changed everything overnight. It was a collection of small moments that slowly formed one undeniable truth. Every time someone spoke about genuine loyalty, your memory appeared without invitation. Every time they met someone new, they unconsciously searched for the same calm presence they once experienced with you. They never planned for those comparisons to happen. They simply did, and with each passing day, the weight of their own regret became harder to ignore. At first, they resisted it. They convinced themselves that they were only being sentimental. They told themselves everyone looks back from time to time. But this felt different. The memories were not asking to be remembered, they were asking to be understood. They began replaying conversations they once dismissed. Words they barely noticed before suddenly carried an entirely new meaning. Your quiet encouragement. Your patience during uncertain seasons. The way you never tried to become someone else just to earn acceptance. They finally recognized that what once seemed ordinary was, in fact, incredibly rare. And then an unexpected question settled into their heart. What if the greatest mistake wasn't walking away, but failing to recognize what they already had while it was standing right in front of them? That question lingered through peaceful mornings and quiet evenings alike. No distraction stayed powerful enough to silence it. The more honestly they reflected, the more they realized that they had measured your worth using temporary emotions instead of lasting character. They had been looking for excitement while overlooking consistency. They had been searching for perfection while missing authenticity. Perhaps this is why these words found you today. Sometimes life gently reminds us that what is truly valuable often reveals itself through time rather than immediate recognition. You may have wondered why certain chapters unfolded the way they did. You may have questioned whether your kindness was ever truly seen. Stay a little longer, because the answer is beginning to emerge, and it carries more meaning than you expect. One evening, while everything around them seemed completely ordinary, they came across something that unexpectedly brought your presence back into focus. It wasn't planned. It wasn't forced. It could have been a familiar place, an old photograph, a simple phrase, or even a melody that carried the feeling of another season. In that quiet instant, they stopped remembering who they wished you had been. They finally remembered who you truly were. That single shift changed everything. For the first time, they weren't viewing the past through disappointment or assumptions. They were seeing it through gratitude, and gratitude revealed what regret had been trying to teach them all along. Their greatest regret was becoming painfully clear. It wasn't losing an opportunity. It was failing to fully appreciate someone whose heart had offered genuine warmth without asking for applause. They realized that people often spend years searching for the very qualities they once overlooked. And as that understanding settled deeper, they found themselves wondering whether some connections are meant to return, not because the past repeats itself, but because wisdom finally catches up with the heart. But there is one part of this realization they have shared with no one. It is the thought that quietly changed every expectation they once held about the future, and when that hidden thought finally surfaced, even they were surprised by what it revealed. Not every truth arrives through conversation. Some truths wait in complete silence until the heart is finally ready to hear them. That is where everything began to shift once again. After carrying this quiet regret for longer than they expected, your soulmate stopped asking what had gone wrong and started asking something much more personal. Who were they when they stood beside me, and why didn't I see it then? The difference between those two questions changed the direction of every thought that followed. As they reflected more honestly, they noticed a pattern they had never recognized before. During difficult moments, your instinct was not to create distance but to create understanding. When uncertainty appeared, you didn't rush to prove yourself. You remained patient, hoping that sincerity would eventually speak louder than misunderstanding. Looking back, they realized that your greatest strength had never been trying to impress anyone. It was the quiet consistency with which you showed up, even when appreciation was uncertain. That realization stayed with them because it could not be ignored anymore. Then something even more unexpected happened. They began noticing pieces of you in places where they had never looked before. A stranger's kindness reminded them of your gentle nature. A peaceful evening carried the same calm they once felt around you. Even ordinary conversation seemed incomplete because they now understood the difference between simply being around people and truly feeling understood by someone. It wasn't that the world had changed. It was that their perspective finally had. If you've ever wondered whether genuine character leaves a lasting impression, this is your answer. The deepest impact is rarely made by loud moments. It is created by countless quiet ones that only reveal their value after time has passed. Sometimes the greatest gift you leave in another person's life isn't a dramatic memory. It's the peaceful feeling they realize they cannot easily replace. Don't skip, because the next realization connects everything that has been unfolding until now. One quiet night, while reflecting on everything they had tried to leave behind, they admitted something they had never been willing to say. Not even to themselves. They whispered that they had mistaken familiarity for certainty. They believed there would always be another chance, another conversation, another perfect moment to say what remained unspoken. But life has a way of teaching us that meaningful opportunities are precious precisely because they are never guaranteed to remain unchanged. That thought settled deeply within them, bringing both humility and clarity. Yet the regret growing inside them was no longer only about the past. It quietly became about the future. They began imagining what life might have looked like if they had trusted the connection instead of their doubts. They pictured simple conversations, shared laughter, peaceful mornings, and the comfort of knowing someone genuinely understood them. These weren't fantasies built on perfection. They were reflections of possibilities they now appreciated far more than they ever had before. And with every passing day, one realization grew impossible to deny: they had not lost the memory of you, they had lost the chance to fully recognize your value when it mattered most. But even after accepting that truth, another discovery was waiting just beyond it. Hidden beneath all of their regret was one quiet decision they made without telling anyone, and that silent decision is about to reveal why your story with them may not be as finished as either of you once believed. There comes a moment when reflection quietly transforms into intention. It does not happen with loud promises or dramatic declarations. It begins with a single decision made in complete silence. A decision no one else notices, yet it changes everything within. That is exactly where your soulmate found themselves. After carrying the weight of unanswered questions for so long, they reached a place where simply remembering you was no longer enough. They wanted to understand why your presence had continued to shape their heart even after so much time had passed. Instead of running from those thoughts, they welcomed them. They stopped blaming circumstances. They stopped searching for excuses. For the first time, they looked inward with complete honesty. And in that quiet place, they discovered something they had never expected to find. Their greatest regret was not one specific choice. It was every small moment when they failed to recognize how deeply you cared while you were quietly showing it. They realized that genuine love is rarely loud. It often hides inside ordinary conversations, thoughtful gestures, patient waiting, and the quiet reassurance that someone is simply there. As that understanding settled into their heart, another unexpected feeling appeared: gratitude. Strange as it seemed, they became grateful that your memory had never completely faded. Because if it had disappeared, they might never have learned this lesson. They might have continued believing that meaningful connections can always be replaced. Now they understood they cannot. Every soul leaves a different imprint, and yours had become impossible to confuse with anyone else's. Perhaps this is why certain people continue crossing our thoughts without warning. Not because the past refuses to let go, but because the heart is still learning something the mind overlooked. Have you ever felt a sudden wave of peace while thinking about someone without knowing why? Sometimes those quiet moments are invitations to see the story from a different perspective. Stay till the end, because another layer is about to unfold, and it may explain more than you imagined. One day, during an entirely ordinary conversation, someone asked them a simple question: what do you value most in a person now? The answer arrived almost instantly, surprising even them. They didn't mention success. They didn't mention appearance or excitement. They spoke about honesty, peace, loyalty. Someone who made them feel accepted without needing to perform. As soon as those words left their lips, a gentle silence followed. Because they suddenly realized they had just described you. That realization lingered long after the conversation ended. They couldn't ignore it anymore. The qualities they now admired most were the very qualities they had once taken for granted. It wasn't because you had changed. It was because they finally had. Growth has a remarkable way of revealing treasures we once walked past without noticing. And when they recognized that truth, their regret no longer felt like a burden alone. It became a teacher, quietly pointing them toward a deeper understanding of what truly matters. Yet one final piece still remained hidden. There was a memory they had avoided for the longest time, not because it was painful, but because it was too meaningful to face before they were ready. When that memory finally returned, it didn't bring sadness. It brought absolute clarity. In that single moment, they understood why your connection had never truly left their heart, and that unforgettable memory is about to reveal everything they have been unable to put into words. Some memories never ask for attention. They simply wait with extraordinary patience until the heart is finally strong enough to receive what they have been protecting all along. That forgotten memory found your soulmate on an ordinary day, without warning and without expectation. There was no special occasion, no dramatic event, no reason for the past to suddenly feel so close. Yet in one quiet instant, everything slowed. A familiar expression crossed their mind. The warmth of your presence returned, not as a distant image, but as a feeling so genuine that it seemed untouched by time. What surprised them was not what they remembered. It was what they had completely missed while living through those moments. They remembered how naturally you celebrated small victories. They remembered how you listened without trying to interrupt. They remembered the calm you carried into situations that could have easily become complicated. Looking back, they realized that your greatest gift had never been trying to stand out. It was making the people around you feel understood without asking for recognition in return. For a long while, they sat quietly with those memories. They weren't trying to change the past anymore. They simply allowed themselves to see it honestly. And honesty revealed something that regret had been hiding beneath its surface. They hadn't only overlooked your actions. They had overlooked the peace that came with your presence. Peace is rarely noticed while we have it. Only after it becomes a memory do we fully understand how precious it truly was. If you have ever questioned whether quiet kindness leaves a lasting mark, let this moment remind you of something important. The deepest impressions are often invisible at first. They grow quietly over time until one day they become impossible to deny. Stay with this journey a little longer, because something important is waiting for you, and every step has been leading toward it. As the days passed, your soulmate noticed another unexpected change within themselves. They stopped thinking about who they wished you had become and started appreciating who you had always been. That shift transformed everything. They no longer measured your worth against impossible expectations. Instead, they recognized the rare qualities that had been present from the very beginning. They realized that authenticity has a quiet brilliance that only becomes obvious when comparison finally disappears. Then came the realization that touched them more deeply than anything before it. They understood that the person they had been searching for in countless future possibilities had never been an imaginary ideal. The qualities they admired most had already existed within the connection they once shared with you. They had simply been too distracted by uncertainty to recognize them. That discovery did not fill them with hopelessness. Instead, it filled them with humility. A quiet understanding that some of life's greatest lessons arrive only after we learn to see with gratitude instead of assumption. And just when they believed they had uncovered the full truth behind their greatest regret, one final realization gently emerged. It wasn't about what they had lost. It was about what they still quietly hoped might one day become possible. They never spoke that hope aloud. They carried it silently, protecting it from doubt, allowing it to grow in the stillness of their heart. That hidden hope has remained untouched until now, and the next chapter will reveal why it may be the most meaningful part of this entire journey. Every meaningful journey eventually arrives at a place where mystery gives way to quiet understanding. This is that moment. Not because every question has been answered, but because the heart has finally learned to listen without rushing ahead. Through every memory, every reflection, and every silent realization, one truth has slowly revealed itself. Your soulmate's greatest regret was never simply about a missed opportunity. It was about discovering your true value only after life had already carried both of you into different seasons of growth. The hope they protected so carefully was never built on fantasy. It was built on respect. They quietly wished that, if life ever allowed your paths to cross again, they would no longer see you through old assumptions. They would see you with wiser eyes, with gratitude instead of expectation, with patience instead of uncertainty, and with appreciation instead of hesitation. That hope remained hidden because they understood something important: meaningful connections cannot be forced. They grow best when both hearts have learned what they could not understand before. Perhaps that is why this message reached you today. Not to convince you that someone else's journey defines your future, but to remind you that your kindness, your sincerity, and your quiet strength were never wasted. Every genuine act of love leaves an imprint, even when its impact is not immediately visible. Sometimes the greatest influence you have on another person's life is discovered long after the moment itself has passed. Think for a moment about everything you have overcome. Every unanswered question. Every season of waiting. Every lesson that quietly shaped your character. None of those moments were empty. They helped create the person you are becoming today. And whether someone recognized your worth immediately or only much later, your value was never determined by the timing of their understanding. It has always existed, steady and unchanged. There is a beautiful difference between regret and wisdom. Regret looks backward wishing things had been different. Wisdom looks forward determined to become different. Somewhere along their journey, your soulmate crossed that invisible line. Their reflections were no longer centered on loss. They became centered on growth. They realized that real connection is not built through perfect timing or perfect words. It is built through honesty, trust, patience, and the courage to truly see another person for who they are. As you move beyond these words, carry this gentle reminder with you. Never underestimate the quiet impact of a sincere heart. The world often celebrates what is loud, immediate, and obvious. Yet the connections that endure are usually the ones formed through kindness, consistency, understanding, and hope. Those qualities never lose their value. Time only makes them easier to recognize. And perhaps that is the quiet surprise hidden inside this entire story. The biggest regret that was finally exposed was never really about the past alone. It became the beginning of a deeper appreciation for what is genuine, meaningful, and lasting. Sometimes that appreciation opens new doors. Sometimes it simply brings lasting peace. Either way, it changes the heart forever. So leave this moment not wondering whether you were enough, but remembering that the right lessons often arrive at exactly the right time. Continue becoming the person who brings light into ordinary moments. Continue choosing grace over bitterness, patience over haste, and authenticity over pretense. The people meant to recognize those qualities will do so with clear eyes and an open heart. And if this message found you at precisely the moment you needed encouragement, then perhaps the most meaningful chapter is not the one you've been looking back on. Perhaps it is the one quietly waiting for you just ahead, where understanding replaces doubt, gratitude replaces regret, and hope gently becomes the beginning of something beautifully new.